Good morning and welcome to a slightly different video today. So today I'll be going through the history of Conwy Water Gardens. I'll mainly be focusing on how we've gone from this to this. There's a lot more blue there. Now it's also a little bit more complicated because the OS maps aren't as good as they used to be, so I will be using the simpler version in most of the video. So my initial plan had been to get a series of maps and show the progression of the site using those maps. Unfortunately, I found it was actually quite difficult to get hold of old maps, and the ones I did manage to get hold of were all very much the same. So I went to the local library to see if they could help, and they put me onto the British Newspaper Archive. I got on very well on that website, and I managed to find lots of information through there. So I will get onto that in a minute, but first of all, we've got to start at the beginning. So this large house here is Glen Isa, and you'll find it on the map about here. Now this house dates back to the 17th century, and like most large houses of the time, it owns a lot of the land around it. The majority of the land is rented out for farming, however the land closest to the house is used as ornamental gardens. And we'll have this advert here for where it was sold around 1948 that does say about the lovely gardens along the side of the buildings. Now, the next reference I found for the house was in 1981, where you can see it's under a different owner. However, it is back up for sale. And this is the first time you see the property start to be divided up. So lot number 2 there is Glen Isa Cottage, which you'll find on the map about here, and that is being sold off separately. Now, there were a couple of articles that had a good description of the house, but were quite brief on the gardens. I will zoom in so you can read it better. They say about the rhododendrons, which were quite common for big houses of the time, but it also says about it having good structure, which I believe you can still see in places, like along the edge of the river here. In 1983, there was an application to turn Glen Isa House into a hotel, and this was done on behalf of Mrs. Somerville, who can't have actually lived there long, because in 1986 it was sold again to this man. Now, Len is the person who I would say truly created Conwy Water Gardens as we know it. Now, not everything was documented, but to be honest, I don't think he had any set plans, so things kind of evolved as he went along. So, it does get a bit complicated. I'll try and do my best to make this make sense. So when Len purchased the property, I suspect it still looked very much like this. It appears one of the first things he did was build the middle lake here, which was confirmed by an article I found later from 1988 that states the lake was opened early 1987. The next article I have is also from 1988, and in it says about the hotel and trout lake that we already know about, but it also mentions cottages, a farm shop, and a smokery. So I have a couple of aerial photographs that may be of help here. So we have this aerial photo here, which is what Len would have moved into. In fact, there is a removals van in the photo, so you never know, that might be him. But you can see all the important buildings that he mentioned in this photo. So the first one is the farm shop, which is here, and it is still a shop today, although it's not a farm shop. You then have the smokery next to it, which is now the pancake house. And then at the back, there's this line of sheds, which gets demolished and turned into a row of holiday cottages. We have a later photo, which is actually much later, but you can see the line of cottages there, and you can actually line it up because of the brick shed at the end. Now we know from this article here that there was a plan to put in 6 small ponds for a trout farm. Now I couldn't find anything that 100% confirmed its location, but I believe from other things that I've read that its location was about here. Over the next few years, the site seems to run pretty much the same, promoting the 2-acre lake for fishing, the smokehouse and shop, and the hotel, which also did afternoon teas. Now, the next article I found was from 1994, and it did confuse me slightly, because it says that he opened the first big trout fishery that week. Obviously, it had been open for a long time, but I went on to do a little bit more research, and I found an advert for the following month that actually showed the new 1-acre lake that was being opened that September. So I'm assuming it was referencing that. It could have been something else, but I wasn't able to find any other evidence. So for the new 1-acre lake, he took the original pond that you can see on the map here and extended it. You can still make out where the original pond was, as the edge of it was lined with stones and some of them are still visible. We now refer to this lake as the bottom lake. The adverts that followed stayed very much the same as before, but it was in 1996 that we got the first inkling of the aquariums. Unfortunately, this was not particularly well received and would not happen for a few more years. What did appear to happen was the change from smokehouse to pancake house. Now, I can't confirm exactly when this happened, as the site kind of changed from just doing smoked fish to doing the odd sandwiches for fishermen to light lunches, But in April 1996, an application was made for an alcohol license, so we can be confident that around that time it was more of a proper restaurant. It was also in this year that an application was made to build a hatchery building, which is what you can see in this photo. So it's 2 years later, and presumably views have changed, as we now see the aquarium allowed to open. Promoting tropical and marine fish, as well as various pond equipment, this seems to go down very well with the visitors, as they're soon asking for more staff. Now if we go back to this advert here, there's something else that it shows, and that's 3 lakes. Now this is referring to the top lake here. Now the top lake was built as a match lake, so it doesn't always feature on the adverts, but in 1998 there was a lot of matches going on. It was very popular. So we're pretty sure that it was 1998 that it opened, so it was built not long before that. Now it is strange because on some of the future adverts it doesn't show up again and it goes back down to 2 lakes. So I think we can be quite precise with when this lake opened. Now I'm going to drop this extra detail in here. Now this house that's circled was built by Len. Unfortunately, I can't find any evidence of when it was built. I just know it was done by Len. Now, it's not terribly important to the story so far, but it will be important in the future. So I just wanted to make sure that this was in here. So now we have a site that has 2 coarse fishing lakes, 1 match fishing lake, a pancake house restaurant, an aquatic centre with aquarium, a trout farm, 4 holiday cottages, and a hotel. And it ran like this for the next few years. Now, a few years later, things went a bit wrong for Len. I believe this was mainly due to a divorce, but he had to sell up. Now, initially, it appears he did try to sell the site as a whole, but eventually it was divided up. By 2007, the trout farm had been filled in, the holiday cottages and main house had been sold off separately. What remained of the site was purchased by the current owners and renamed Conwy Water Gardens. Now, unfortunately, this is where my research ended, as not only had I reached my objective of finding out when the lakes were built, but also there was nothing else on the newspaper archives. Unfortunately, their archive is incomplete, but I can't end the timeline there, so the following dates will be rough estimations from what I've been told by the current owners. Over the first few years, there were many things the current owners did that went completely undocumented. These included upgrading the toilet facilities, paving the car park, and replacing the fishing pegs with more accessible wooden platforms. But the main cost came around 2008 when they took this line of sheds from the back of the shop and replaced it with a new aquarium building. The new building was more spacious with better accessibility, and with the white walls it gave a much more appealing sales area. There was, however, some unforeseen costs, as part of the planning permission meant they also had to create a slate roof over the top of the shop and pancake house to replace the previous PVC roof. 2009 saw the introduction of both the Asian short-clawed otters and the capybaras as attractions. Their enclosures were initially built here, close to the middle lake, causing some complaint from the fishermen due to noisy tourists. In 2011, the owners decided to develop this area here, where the breeding ponds had once been. They reinstalled a number of ponds, adding paths and bridges. They also relocated the otters and capybaras as part of a nature trail, away from the middle lake. It fully opened in 2012. This is how the water gardens ran for the next few years. The owners did look to sell in 2016 as they wanted to retire, but it was taken back off the market in 2020 due to the COVID-19 outbreaks. The 2020 lockdowns caused problems for everyone, but for the water gardens it meant we lost the main source of income. As the pancake house was often closed and the fishing lakes went unused, with no income for much of the year, maintenance on the grounds was cut back, and to minimise electric usage, the pumps to the top lake were turned off, allowing it to drain and quickly become overgrown. It was also in this year that our capybara sadly passed away of old age. After the lockdowns, we did our best to return to normal, and in 2022, the water gardens was put back on the market. In 2023, due to a promising buyer, the otters were rehomed and the aquarium was shut down. Unfortunately, the sale did not go ahead, but the owners took the decision to not reinstate the aquarium. The water gardens continues to run using the middle lake for fishing, the bottom lake and nature trail paths as a wooded walk, the Dutch Pancake House as an on-site restaurant, and the shop as a pond sales area throughout the summer. The site has a lot of potential and is still up for sale. It will be interesting to know what the future holds. If you found this video interesting, please leave it a like, and if you want to keep up to date with changes, make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you later.